Okay, let's dive right into it. Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're unpacking a truly massive 50-year study from the Research Institute of Industrial Economics. And it asks one of the most fundamental questions of human development. How exactly do parenting styles predict a child's lifetime outcomes? We're looking at a rich data set here that tracks thousands of individuals across decades, all to see how the way they were raised impacted their education, their earnings, and really, their entire lives.
So here's our roadmap for today. We'll start with the parenting puzzle, define the three main styles, look at the 50-year tracking timeline, and then reveal those long-term outcomes. Finally, we'll unpack the mechanisms driving the numbers and wrap up with the big takeaways.
Part 1. The Parenting Style Puzzle.
Parenting is arguably one of the most consequential decisions a person can make, right? Yet, isolating a specific style from other factors, like, say, household income, is notoriously data scarce. It's like a giant puzzle. Which leads us to our core mystery. How much does your parents' style actually shape your entire life? Does a strict household guarantee success, or does it hinder it? Does a free-spirited upbringing lead to better earnings, or worse? Well, we finally have the long-term data to answer exactly that.
Moving on to Part 2, defining the three styles.
To really understand this data, we first need to look at the three main categories identified by developmental psychologists. First up is authoritarianism. Now, what's really interesting here is that this style fundamentally relies on paternalistic control. It's a coercive style. Parents restrict choices, demand total obedience, and they heavily lean on punishment to enforce strict boundaries. It's very much a top-down approach to raising kids.
To bring this to life, researchers used actual survey questions given to mothers way back in 1968. Mothers who strongly agreed with the statement, "Children must learn to obey," along with things like "children must revere their parents," while they were heavily indexed into this authoritarian category.
Next, we have the authoritative style. And notice the contrast here. Authoritative parents definitely still set firm boundaries, but they rely on persuasion rather than coercion. It's more of a democratic style. It promotes rules and stability through guidelines, investing heavily in shaping the child's preferences and understanding of right and wrong. So rather than just forcing compliance, they're explaining the why.
Looking again at that authentic 1968 survey data, this quote perfectly anchors the authoritative style in real-world attitudes. These parents strongly agreed that children must have firm rules and that you have to be consistent when raising children. It really emphasizes structure, but without relying purely on punitive obedience.
And finally, we have the permissive category. This is an indulgent, highly child-centered style. Permissive parents focus heavily on immediate happiness and emotional well-being, giving the child a vast amount of autonomy to make their own choices. Basically, they prioritize the child's immediate needs and wants over enforcing strict behavioral guidelines.
You can really see that mindset solidified in this survey quote. The most important thing is that the child is happy and content. Mothers who indexed high in this category also strongly agreed that as long as the child feels loved, well, nothing else really matters.
All right, Part 3. Tracking kids over decades. Now that our three styles are clearly defined, let's look at one of the most comprehensive data sets ever analyzed. Researchers tracked a cohort of nearly 3,000 children born in Stockholm in 1953. In 1968, when those kids were 15, their mothers took that comprehensive parenting style survey. From there, researchers used administrative records to track those exact same children straight through the 1990s to evaluate their adult earnings, and all the way up to 2001 to measure their final life outcomes. This is an incredibly rare opportunity to see how a snapshot of parenting in 1968 predicts a child's reality in the 21st century.
Part 4, the long-term outcomes. Let's see what they found.
Before we open the envelope on the results, keep in mind that researchers meticulously adjusted this data to account for family income and the child's baseline intelligence. They wanted to make sure we're isolating the parenting style itself. And wow, the data reveals a shocking statistic. A 1 standard deviation jump in authoritarian parenting predicts a stark 6.1 percentage point drop in the likelihood of that child graduating from university.
When you look at the cascading negative effects, the impact of a highly coercive upbringing becomes crystal clear. That 6.1 percentage point drop in university graduation, that represents a 16.4% relative decrease compared to the sample average. Authoritarian parenting also predicts a 3.3% relative drop in finishing high school, and, astonishingly, a massive 73% relative increase in the amount of unemployment benefits received by the time those children reach the year 1990.
So the crucial point here is, while authoritarian parenting severely impacted educational attainment, permissive parenting showed a totally different long-term penalty.
A 1 standard deviation increase in permissive parenting consistently predicted 4.7% lower long-run labor earnings during the 1990s.
Which brings us to part 5, unpacking the mechanisms.
So why exactly do these styles lead to such drastically different lifetime outcomes? Well, the researchers brilliantly proved this isn't just about innate genetics. They looked at 2 types of intelligence. Fluid intelligence, which is your innate spatial ability and processing speed, is largely predetermined and mostly unaffected by parenting style. But crystallized intelligence, which is the accumulation of math and verbal knowledge, is highly dependent on your environment. The data showed that authoritarian parenting directly hindered this crystallized knowledge accumulation, actively reducing the child's academic proficiency over time.
But it's not just about test scores, it's about expectations. When comparing these styles, authoritarian parents were 4.1 percentage points more likely to actively agree that it would be nice if their child left school early and started working soon. In stark contrast, authoritative parents highly valued continued education, and they actively viewed a lack of schooling as a major obstacle in life. The parents' expectations literally altered the child's trajectory.
And here is a totally surprising fact to add to the mix. Despite the constant battles parents have with their kids over instant gratification, a parent's specific style actually has almost zero link to a child's long-term patience or time preferences. No way, right? Whether you're strict, democratic, or totally indulgent, your child's inherent patience remains largely unaffected by your parenting style.
All right, part 6, the big takeaways.
Let's synthesize all this massive academic data into some actionable insights. To summarize the core findings, first, authoritarian parenting consistently and clearly predicts lower educational attainment and higher unemployment dependency. Second, permissive parenting is uniquely linked to lower long-term labor earnings. Third, these lifetime outcomes are deeply tied to a parent's expectations and how they communicate the value of knowledge. And finally, these effects hold true regardless of a family's bank account or a child's innate fluid intelligence. Basically, how a parent communicates structurally alters a child's life.
And this brilliantly illustrates where we're heading as a society. Data from the World Value Survey shows how the cultural demand for childhood obedience is plunging across the globe. Whether you look at Sweden, the US, Canada, or Australia, modern society is rapidly shifting away from the authoritarian demand for strict obedience. Given what we just learned about how coercive parenting hinders educational attainment, this cultural shift is likely great news for future knowledge-based economies.
Which leaves us with a final fascinating thought to ponder. If authoritarianism measurably limits human capital and educational potential, how are today's rapidly changing, more child-centered parenting trends actively shaping the global economy of tomorrow? It's an absolutely incredible intersection of family dynamics and economics. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep questioning the data around you.